There's a tradition in Washington of surveying both members of Congress, senior staff, administration figures, National Journal, and to some extent Washingtonian Magazine and occasionally Congressional Quarterly. All of these surveys of lobbying influence. Who's the most significant, powerful lobbying group in D.C.? And in these surveys, going back 20, 25 years, AIPAC comes out in the top 5 year after year after year. They clearly exert a great deal of influence, just judging by the fact that those who they're trying to influence, the folks on Capitol Hill in the administration, year after year acknowledge, affirm, embrace the fact that they're one of the handful of most effective, most influential groups active in Washington today. Now, what's interesting about that is they're the only foreign or group representing what we might describe as foreign interests. This is American Israel, of course, Political Action Committee, but still, it's to the extent that they're lobbying about and for Israeli interests. The others are almost exclusively domestic. The National Rifle Association, AARP, these are the other strong groups that show up again and again. Chamber of Commerce show up again and again in these surveys. So one has to be impressed with every country or every group or every interest around the world also has lobbying groups that represent them in Washington. But none have managed to break into what's largely a domestic field of the top, most active, most able lobbyists. None of the international groups have been able to break in anything like the way AIPAC has. But I've been impressed by how a couple of groups, most notably J Street, has managed to move into a space that was very much, for a very long time, dominated by AIPAC. Sometimes gets played that AIPAC is the older generation, baby boomers, and J Street is Gen X. I don't think that's entirely accurate. I know members of both age groups who support the views of either J Street or AIPAC, but there is something to the fact that there's, I think, a younger generation that was not raised on the sort of formation of Israel, the wars in '67 and thereafter. J Street has achieved, I think, a remarkable level of success for a relatively young organization. They have managed to move, I think, remarkably quickly into, they don't share the spotlight with AIPAC, but in a story about U.S.-Israel relations, in a story about Israeli politics, in a story about American Jews and their interest in foreign policy issues in general, J Street's going to be in the story too. And that's a serious accomplishment. If we had a scorecard on most of the major issues, AIPAC's perspective still carries the day. J Street, however, gets its point of view heard, and I suspect that if there's a spectrum, and here's what AIPAC wants, and here's the other side, U.S. policy used to come very close to AIPAC's desire. J Street's moved it in some different direction. My sense, at least, is that they've moderated or softened policies that used to be closely or almost entirely dominated by AIPAC's point of view.